I didn't turn the microphone on. Right. A slight delay, sorry about that, but it is going out live. So welcome to this Integrated Care Partnership first live meeting, physical meeting. Seems quite strange, you know, I've seen people over the last year and had lots of meetings, but to actually see everybody physically, it makes it so much better. Just one or two things really, just to say that, you know, it's absolute honour and privilege to be able to co-chair this Integrated Care Partnership along with Roy Councillor Webb, who's in the corner. We've sort of co-chaired this, and, you know, when you think back over the last year, so many thanks to officers, partners, stakeholders. The work that's gone on behind the scenes to get us to where we are today is just so much appreciated. You know, as I say, you forget how much is going off in the background, you know, and this has been on top of the usual day jobs that everybody's got as well. You know, the ordinary things still keep going on. One thing that I do think is that we have been good in Derbyshire and Derby City at partnership working, and I do think that COVID, I mean, for all the horrendous things that happened in COVID, one of the things that did come out of it is the fact that we worked quicker and in a better way, I think, with partners. We moved things on quickly. We got partners at the table that had never been involved before. And I think that if we can keep that going, then that's only going to benefit this partnership. So, you know, I think that is really, you know, encouraging. So there's still an awful lot of work, and I don't doubt there'll be changes. And in fact, I was in, well, I couldn't make the, there is an LGA Integrated Care Partnership Chairman's meeting, and that was this morning. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it, but it's quite interesting to hear how other ICPs are doing and where they're at. And we're pretty much, you know, more or less, I think, more or less in the same level from what I can pick up. And the things that have been raised have been problems that we've talked about. So yeah, it's been quite interesting, but unfortunately I missed this morning's meeting. So I think you've been told how to use the microphones. It's just press the button and red and then switch it off when you've finished speaking. I would like to do introductions because, as I say, I think it's the first time, and I don't know what it is, but I said to Helen and go, when you see people virtually, when you see them physically, they actually look slightly different. So, I mean, some I've met before, so I do know, but I think it would be nice to sort of go along and sort of introduce ourselves. So we'll finish we'll finish on this round, so we'll start with Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Helen Jones. I work as Executive Director for Adult Social Care and Health with Derbyshire County Council.
I'm Natalie Hoy. I'm the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care from Derbyshire County Council.
Julie Patton, I'm Cabinet Member for Children's Services and Safeguarding, Derbyshire County Council.
Ellie Holston, Director of Public Health, Derbyshire County Council.
Robin Jewis, I'm Director of Public Health, Derby City Council.
Avi Bhatia, GP and representing the CPLG here.
I'm John McDonald, I'm Chair of the Integrated Care Board and Vice Chair of the Integrated Care Partnership.
Afternoon, colleagues. Chris Clayton, Chief Exec of NHS Derby in Derbyshire. Thank you.
Afternoon, I'm Helen Henderson and I'm Chief Exec of Healthwatch in Derbyshire.
Hello, Sean Thornton, Deputy Director of Communications and Engagement for NHS Derby and Derbyshire.
Hi, Zara Jones, Exec Director of Strategy and Planning at Derby and Derbyshire, ICB.
Hello, Ian Hall, External Advisor working with colleagues on the production of the Integrated Care Strategy.
Afternoon, Tracy Allen, I'm Chief Exec at Derbyshire Community Health Services.
Hello, Kate Brown, I'm Director of Joint Commissioning and Community Development for NHS Derby and ICB.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephen Bateman, I'm Chief Executive of DHU Healthcare.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Will Legg. I'm Director of Strategy and Transformation for East Midlands Ambulance Service.
Hello, I'm Councillor Jill Mannion-Brunt from Chesterfield Borough Council.
Hi, I'm Christine Duran, Executive Director at Chesterfield Borough Council.
Hello, I'm James Moore, Chief Executive of Healthwatch Derby City. Afternoon, folks. My name's James Gracie. I'm the Director for Performance, Quality and Partnerships at Derbyshire County Council, and I'm here on behalf of Carol Camus, our Executive Director for Children's Services.
Councillor Roy Webb. I'm Cabinet Member for Adults, Health and Housing at Derby, Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board at Derby City, and Joint Chair of the Integrated Care Partnership.
Hi there, my name's Alex Huff. I'm the Head of Democratic Services at Derby City Council.
Afternoon, everyone. Kim Harper, and I'm Chief Executive at Community Action in Derby.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Chris Pienaar, Chief Executive of Derbyshire Autism Services and representative, VCSE representative for Derbyshire.
Hi everyone, Wyn Garnett, Programme Lead for embedding the voluntary community and social enterprise sector in the integrated care system.
Hello everybody, Lindsay Stevens, I'm the DSO for this meeting.
Hello everybody, I'm Alison Wynne, Assistant Director of Public Health at City Council.
I suppose really I ought to have introduced myself as well in case you don't know me. Carol Hart, I'm Cabinet Member for Health and Communities at Derbyshire County Council, and I chair the Derbyshire County Council Health and Wellbeing Board. So we get on with the agenda now. The first thing, apologies, we have a few, I think. Thanks, Lynn.
Hello, we've got apologies from Carol Camus, Councillor Mary Dooley, Drew Smith, Hal Spencer, Karen Hanson, Penelope Blackwell and Stephen Posey.
Thank you. Any other that you know about? Nope. We've late items to be introduced by the Chair, no late items, so we're sticking to the agenda that we've got. Next item is declarations of interest.
Thanks. Item 10 is a for information item on the CPLG update. Part of that pertains to appointment of a substantive chair from March. It's for information. I won't cover that in my update.
No, right, we can move on to the minutes of the last meeting for those that were there. If we go for accuracy first, and then if anybody wants to raise anything, we'll do that for accuracy first. So that's page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. I think that's it. Oh no, 14, only 13. Any matters arising on those minutes? Can't see any hands, so you're all happy to accept those as a true record. Thank you. So we go on to discussion and decisions. So the first one is a report from the Health and Wellbeing Board. So Andy isn't with us today for Derby City, but Helen is, and I think Robin is going to do the Derby City. So if you've gone first, Helen, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will start and then I will hand over to Robin Jewis from Derby City to talk a little bit about the perspective from Derby City. So this is the regular report that's been coming into the Shadow Integrated Care Partnership, and we also have the twin report that goes out from this meeting to the two health and wellbeing boards in Derby and Derbyshire. And the intention of bringing these reports every time is to make sure that we are supporting alignment between the two partnership arenas and ensuring that there is a joint effort on those shared outcomes, minimising the risk of duplication of effort, maximising any opportunities that there are for adding value to the work that we're doing in one forum, and identifying and mitigating any shared risks. So today the report is here for information and consideration of any particular implications for the integrated care partnership. I won't go through all the detail in the report. The work that the Derbyshire Health and Wellbeing Board has been undertaking is set out at section 4.2 of the report, and there's a range of development activity set out there alongside the timetable for the development of the joint local health and wellbeing strategy refreshed, which we'll be working on over the course of the year and which it is intended will be signed off in January 2024. And I would just like to draw members' attention to paragraph 4.4, where reference is made to a specific development offer from the local government association. We've talked in shadow meetings and in health and wellbeing boards about there might be times when it's helpful for the health and wellbeing boards and the integrated care partnership to come together and have a development session together, and we have got an offer from the local government association to enable us to do that. There's detail of that offer set out there in the report, and the suggestion is that we proceed with that joint opportunity with the date of June that's set out there in the report as well. Paragraph 4.5 talks about the joint areas of, the areas of focus for the board at the moment in Derbyshire, the Health and Wellbeing Board. So you can see that there's a range of areas that we've been considering in the Health and Wellbeing Partnership in Derbyshire. So I'll hand over to Robin to talk about the Derby City Health and Wellbeing Board.
Thank you. So you can find the update from Derby City there under 4.7. And there's just a summary of the considerations of the last meeting. A particular focus on that meeting in January was on housing and homelessness, and that relates to the ICP's shared turning the curve priority around housing and the impact of housing on health. There was considerable discussion around that health impact assessment and also the health needs assessment around homelessness, and one of the outcomes from that was really requesting a further conversation to understand how the Health and Wellbeing Boards and the ICB and the ICP relate to each other within this work, and that's something that we're continuing to consider. There's also a link there within the in 4.12 around the updated Health and Wellbeing Board guidance, which has been published, which is helping us to understand how we work together more as Health and Wellbeing Boards and ICPs as well. So nothing else for me from that.
Well, we're being asked to note the work of both Health and Wellbeing Boards, Derby City and Derbyshire, and to consider any implications for the ICP. I think that you've already mentioned about a development session, and I think that would be really useful, and I think that might draw some things out. But if anybody's got any thoughts on that, seems as though we can really move on. Then I don't think there will be too many implications, but I think that joint working, if we can have a development session with both, that would probably bring things out. So that would be great. Right, so we can move on to the next item then, which is the report from the Integrated Care Board. I can see the chairman's disappeared, but Chris is here, so perhaps you can take over then, Chris. Thank you. Oh, it's John's coming back.
We'd already decided that division of labour, Chair, so it's all good. Happy to take colleagues through. Obviously, take the report as read, but linking with what Helen said, there's an important theme about all of us being able to see the connectivity of the different strategies and approaches, and us spending time to recognise that. I think that will be important. So, the main item on the report is just to set out the planning guidance that's arrived from NHS England for local NHS services to respond to. Colleagues who aren't as close to this as those who are working in the NHS will probably not realise that every year the NHS is asked to focus on very specific priorities, whilst also thinking about a longer term plan, and this year's no different. So in area 4.1, it describes the planning guidance for this 23-24 financial year, but also sets out how integrated care boards and local NHSs need to create a joint forward plan that spans for 5 years. Essentially, if you think about those two things together, you've got the first year of a longer term plan, and think of it in those contexts. Importantly, the joint forward plan as it says in the paper, needs to be shared and more broadly owned. And again, similarly, just talking about the interaction between the local NHS, the Integrated Care Partnership and the Health and Wellbeing Boards. You know, we've got a lot of work to do together to make sure there's alignment between all of those different plans. And from what I've seen, I've every confidence that we'll do that. But you can certainly see in the principle set out about that alignment and how important it is. So we'll obviously be working through the planning guidance now for the 23-24 year. That process is going through, and there are submission dates to NHS England between now and the start of the next financial year, where we set out our absolute operational plan for next year. Obviously, as you can imagine, we'll be having a significant focus on waiting times and waiting lists, as you can appreciate within that, amongst other things. So we'll also be setting out the Integrated Care Board's 5-year plan, but wanted to talk to the Integrated Care Partnership and the Health and Wellbeing Boards to make sure that they flow from one to the other and in a seamless way. You can see on the agenda later on, we are talking about the Integrated Care Strategy, so the two must talk to one another, and I'm sure they will. In terms of further developments, last time the ICP met, I did forward a letter from Right Honourable Patricia Hewitt about the Hewitt Review into Integrated Care Systems. Colleagues will remember that. There's just a further update in the paper today, and of course we're lucky that we've got colleagues in Derbyshire who are taking part in some of the work streams that are forming part of that review. Not wanting to put too much pressure on the report itself, but we are hoping for good things out of it. We are wanting to see clarity around the role of integrated care systems from the NHS point of view, clarity about how they work with NHS England, and of course how we want to support local communities and developing in local communities, particularly through place. So there's a lot to be considered when that report lands. News a bit closer to home, of course. The Mental Health Delivery Board, our own delivery board, has set out a couple of priority areas that are listed in the report, and I'm sure we all welcome those. And of course, we are working through as a health and care system the impacts of industrial action that are ongoing at the moment, and likely to continue through certainly the early part of the year. Obviously, we saw industrial action this week with the ambulance service, as we've seen previously, but there are other sectors involved as well, and we continue to work together to ensure we continue to provide safe services during those times. Just on a similar vein, really, just to highlight the significant work that's gone on again across the Health and Care Partnership about reducing ambulance waiting times outside of our emergency departments, and recognise there's been periods of industrial action, but on the whole, I'm pleased to report that we have seen reductions in those waiting times across Derby and Derbyshire. Huge amount of work that's gone on to make that happen, both within our hospital trust, but also in our other settings. And our key now is to maintain those changes in a sustainable way. So a very welcome bit of news to report. Early days, but we are making progress there. And then lastly, of course, just obviously want to recognise the work that our colleagues on the front line are doing in health and care at the moment. It remains a challenging time, but colleagues doing all they can. So I'll probably pause there, Chair, and obviously take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Chris? I would just say, when you mentioned about waiting times, it seems to vary dramatically across the country. Some seem to be absolutely horrendous, but we seem in our area to be, I'm not saying it's absolutely perfect, but certainly it's nowhere near as bad as some areas, and I just wonder with that. And the other thing as well that cropped up as well when you spoke about sort of working together, I'm just thinking about the Health and Wellbeing Board. Of course, we've changed now, and I know Councillor Webb is the same as Lee. It's about the housing survey and condition survey and all that. So there's lots of strands that are going to feed into this partnership as well, but we need other partners, and that's why we've sort of, I know we're different because, Derby City Unitary, but with us having districts and boroughs, they're responsible for the housing condition surveys, so they're now attending the Health and Wellbeing Board, and I think for a long while they didn't feel as though they'd got any input into health. You know, and they have. There's a lot of things that it can do at district and borough level that do impact. So yeah, so I think that is good. So any questions for Jeff? Yeah.
Just following on from that, Chair, mentioning about the local authorities, it was just a question about mental health, Chris, and you mentioned the Mental Health Delivery Board and the IC board, but we work a lot with Living Well Derbyshire, and I just wondered where that kind of fitted into the governance and delivery structure and reported through here, if it does at all. So forgive my ignorance if I haven't got the structures right, but I just wondered where that actually sat, Chris.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Happy to report. And it isn't ignorance at all. It is complex and complicated, the governance that we all have, trying to bring all of this together. So, and it's work in progress, I think is fair to say, and it'll continue to iterate. So what I can give assurance on is that as a health and care partnership, we have the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Delivery Board. And that particular delivery board is probably, without putting too much pressure on it, is probably one of our more advanced delivery boards because of the relative sort of definition that you can put around that. And the way it's been led initially by Ifti Majid, as we know, has moved to Nottinghamshire, but Carolyn Green is continuing to lead that board for us, is an inclusive one and has not only obviously NHS representation across the sector, but also has got local authority and voluntary sector partners on there as well. So it's in itself as a board is an inclusive one with the partnership. Where that reports, well, obviously it does report through to the NHS, and through the NHS there's a clear link to the Integrated Care Partnership, Health and Wellbeing Boards. I'm making the assumption, although I don't know that as I'm talking, that there'll also be a connection through those representatives from local authorities into local authorities themselves as well. So I hope that makes sense. And every so often I do produce a new sheet with it all laid out. It's probably time to do that again, I'd have thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering where young people's mental health sits within this, because I can't really see it within the body of the...
Yes, it's not specifically mentioned because it's a sort of highlight report and it's pulled out areas. It's not a comprehensive briefing of all the work that's gone on through the Integrated Care Board and the NHS in Derbyshire. So it's picked out certain points. But in terms of assurance, the children and young people's mental health is looked at through the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Board I've just been referencing. So it's not just an adult only board. We also have the Children's Delivery Board. Andy Smith, who's not here today, chairs that on our behalf. So we've got another forum that looks at children's health and well-being as well. So it's certainly not there.
Thank you for letting me come back. It's such an important issue at the moment. I mean, with most authorities and certainly with ours at Derbyshire County Council, I just feel that it's not strengthened enough, and I think it should be, rather than it feeds in, I think it should be quite a priority within this document.
Well, certainly. Well, I think all of us sitting in the room, are concerned about levels of increasing, mental ill health amongst our young people. I think we all are. I think there are lots of strains and pressures on them, and the work of the Delivery Board certainly would want to recognise that and increase its prominence in terms of the work that we do. But it's noted. Your view's noted, and thank you.
I mean, I do agree when you think back about mental health, it was more older people and everything else, but now you see the impact on young children as well. It is important. Any questions? Any more questions? Yes.
Perhaps not so much a question, just a statement really. Just to On the integration and how we all move forward and working together, I just wanted to provide a little bit of feedback from a Chesterfield Health and Wellbeing Partnership group that we had last week. And I was feeding back from the Derbyshire Health and Wellbeing Board, explaining that we were going to be using the development of the Derbyshire Place Partnership to deliver health and wellbeing board issues as well as integrated care partnership. And I think there was just a massive welcoming of the fact that we were bringing things together and we weren't going to create another group to do something else. And I think, you know, it's reflected in both Chris's report and Helen's previous report. And I just think, you know, the thinking that's been done and the bringing of this together is just really welcomed at all levels. So thank you.
On that, I think, again, by including the districts and boroughs and senior officers, again, that's getting that link, isn't it, working. So, yeah, I know. I should have said as well as being Derbyshire, I'm also leader at Erebus Borough Council, so my office directors is really keen to get involved and see what it's all about. So, yeah, anything that's good. Yes, yeah.
Apologies, I thought I'd pressed it. Hello everyone, I'm Carolyn Green, I'm the Interim Chief Executive and I'm the current Senior Responsible Officer for the Mental Health and LD Autism Board, so I really welcome your comments, and if there is at any point you want to have any information or we can work on how we raise up the prominence or sharing information on what we're doing, I'd really welcome that. So if on a break you want to have a chat, please do, and thank you very much.
Right, I can't see any other questions, so we really just asked to note the report that you've given. Thank you, Chris. So we can now move on to draft integrated care strategy. Now, a lot of work gone into this, so are you going to lead on this then, Helen? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So myself and Tracy Allen are going to talk through some slides, but before we do, can I thank Kate Brown and Ian Hall, both of whom are here today, sitting next to Tracy, for all their work in getting us to this point, and also to all colleagues who've contributed to the strategy draft as we have it in front of us today. So thank you. So if we can just, I think somebody's operating the slides very kindly for me. Thank you. So we'll just leave it on the cover sheet for now. So as I said, we've got a short presentation to convey the key points from the draft integrated care strategy, which has been circulated to members of this partnership. I'm going to speak to the first half of the slide set, and then I will hand over to Tracy, who will speak to the second half. And we're going to talk to people for about 10 minutes, but leave plenty of time then for questions and discussion about the strategy. If people wouldn't mind waiting until we've got to the end before they ask their questions or raise their hands, that will help us to get through the slideshow first. So if we could move on to the second slide, please. So just to say a little bit about the development of the strategy, so how we've got to where we are. So on the slide, you'll see a summary of the key steps in the development to date, starting with the issuing of the national guidance at the end of July last year, up until where we are today and what needs to happen next. Members will recall that we had a draft framework document considered and supported by the board at our Shadow Integrated Care Partnership on the 7th of December. And from that meeting, work's been undertaken to prepare the draft strategy. The intention is to incorporate practical steps and actions as well as strategic themes. So it's therefore a longer document than some strategies you might see. However, we felt that it was important to be clear on the underpinning work and actions required to make a difference to integrated care delivery in Derby and Derbyshire, and I hope you will see that coming through when you look at the document itself. We also recognise, however, the need to ensure that the content is accessible and can be easily understood by people who might want to read it across Derby and Derbyshire. Therefore, the version of the strategy which we will present in April will be accompanied by a summary document that will communicate the key elements of the strategy in a shorter and more accessible format. As Tracy will cover in her slides shortly, the move from a strategy document to the delivery of work programmes and action plans through broader engagement will then be the focus as we move forward. And finally, to note that the strategy won't be a static document. There's a requirement for the Integrated Care Partnership to review and update the document when joint strategic needs assessments are revised. So in summary, while good joined up work has taken place to develop the content of the strategy so far, this today is just the starting point. And we'd welcome oversight from the ICP going forward to oversee the continuous improvement and the ongoing renewal of the strategy into the future. So slide 3, which is about involvement, and I think this is really to emphasise that the way that we are developing the strategy is just as important as the content in the strategy. So there are positive working relationships between partners that we want to build on, and the first couple of lines on this slide reflect some of the ways in which we're facilitating true system working. We also want this to read and feel like our strategy developed for the people of Derby and Derbyshire, and not just a local version of the national guidance or indeed a strategy that reads the same as that of any other integrated care system. So you will see that the majority of the content has been produced by local leaders reflecting their views on the real world opportunities and constraints for integrated care. If we could move to slide 4, please. And I'll say a little bit about context. So in the document itself, references are included as to how the strategy development has been aligned with other system strategies and plans and where further work might be required in this regard. So this slide is including a list of some of the critical plans and strategies that we have referred to and aligned with in the development of this strategy. The way in which the work programmes for the strategy achieve this alignment will be crucial. And we've just talked about the importance of alignment in the previous discussion. So it will require a true collaborative mindset and require progress to be made on the strategic enablers referenced in the document, including those relating to system governance, the development of shared values as a partnership, principles and behaviours. And Tracy will say a little bit more about those themes when she comes to her part of the presentation. The wording in the strategic context section recognises the current environment for health and care is incredibly challenging on a number of fronts, and the strategy cannot be developed in a bubble that ignores these system pressures. However, we can make real improvements and progress against our strategic aims and expected outputs by developing more integrated and productive working relationships, addressing the constraints and opportunities documented in the strategy, and learning from what we already do well. So slide 5 takes us on to more of a focus around drivers. So section 3 in the strategy summarises the work to develop a set of joined up care Derbyshire priority population outcomes and key indicators, which we call for brief turning the curve, based upon the Derby and Derbyshire joint strategic needs assessments. The desired population outcomes are listed on the slide, and these sit alongside the health inequality indicators and key objectives from the 2 local authority plans that are referenced in the document. In addition, you will have seen a section on health protection in the document, and this has been developed with the directors of public health from the 2 local authorities and includes the key areas of work and strategic actions that they have identified that require the support of the system and the partnership. So finally from me, slide 6 just talks about our strategic aims. So the strategic aims for integrated care in Derby and Derbyshire are included in this slide, and they remain the same as the ones you saw in the framework that we brought to this partnership in December. These remain, in the view of people involved, relevant and appropriate based upon the drivers and the context outlined, and will be key in shaping the work that lies ahead of us, including the process for evaluating the strategy. So I will now hand over to Tracy.
A seamless double act, thank you. In the remaining slides then, I'm going to summarise the plan for responding to the context, our population's health and care needs, and those strategic aims that we agreed earlier in the year that Helen's taken us through. Thank you. At the heart of the strategy is a focus on what we've called strategic enablers. and I'll come on to talk a bit more about those in another slide. It also includes work around system architecture and our governance arrangements, and the development of common values, principles and behaviours that underpin how partners in the system will all work together. For architecture and governance, we need to reflect on the current arrangements for overseeing integrated care development, both from a system perspective through this integrated care partnership and our integrated place executive, at our two places in Derby and Derbyshire, and also at a programme level, especially for the three key areas of focus that we've agreed. We need to be assured that there are robust and fully connected governance arrangements in place that address the current constraints, and we've highlighted some of these in the three focus area proposal documents that a number of us reviewed in January. On our shared purpose, values, principles and behaviours, we know that each of the organisations within Joined Up Care Derbyshire has its own vision and sets of values developed with staff, with patients, with citizens. But within this context, we need to consider how a set of shared values and principles and cultural norms could support the development and delivery of integrated care. And so as part of mobilising the strategy, we need to ensure that there's support for reviewing the organisational development opportunities to do that in line with our strategic aims. We could have the next slide, sounding like Chris Whitty. Coming back to these enablers then that are at the heart of the strategy. We've got identified on the slide a number of enabling alliances, functions and approaches. And we want to have a primary focus on the areas listed in this slide, because if we can systematically improve the way in which they support integration, the benefits will be widespread and impact well beyond the three key areas of focus that we've chosen to include in this strategy. If through the integrated care strategy we can sponsor actions to address the really practical constraints that our colleagues feel to developing a one workforce approach, shared care digital records, and release the full potential of the VCSE sector, for example, this will have positive impacts right across health and care in Derby and Derbyshire. The document provides summary information on the areas listed on the slide, so I won't repeat that here, but hopefully the section gives you a good indication of the benefits that we can achieve by focusing on these enabling functions. I did just want to bring up here the importance of primary care, the constraints within which primary care colleagues are operating, and the national vision developed through the Fuller report, which are referenced in section 4 of the strategy. Primary care will be absolutely critical to the success, our success, for all three key areas of focus, and we need as a partnership to ensure that there's senior sponsorship and involvement from primary care colleagues right across these work programmes in developing them and delivering them over the coming months and years. You'll recall that in the December framework document, we included some examples of good practice from across Derby and Derbyshire, and we're currently reviewing and updating these with the aim of selecting a number of examples to go into the final version of the strategy, aligned to the enablers and the key areas of focus. We're also reviewing these examples from a sort of strength-based approach to identify how difficult decisions have been made where we have worked successfully together, including shifts in funding, changes in commissioning arrangements, and how organisational sovereignty issues have been overcome. These lessons learned will then be used in helping us to tackle the difficult decisions that we know will lie ahead. Slide 9 then is those key areas of focus, the what of our strategy. And the proposed 3 areas have been prepared by senior responsible officers, some of whom are in this room, and working groups that align, as Helen said, to the Start Well, Stay Well and Age and Die Well groupings. And they're summarised in section 5. This follows on from the ICP meeting in December, where we agreed that a number of areas should be selected so that we could test our approach to integrated care in line with the strategic aims and enablers included in the emerging strategy. A number of us, as I've said, were participated in a workshop on the 20th of January where these areas of focus were presented, and members were asked to comment on the proposals in writing if they couldn't attend the workshop, or during the Q&A sessions for those of us that were there. We haven't received any further comments subsequent to the discussion that those of us at the workshop had. So the outcome was the endorsement of these 3 proposals, subject to our agreement in the partnership today. I just wanted to highlight that we've not framed these key areas, these proposals, as priorities, because they're not necessarily regarded as being more important than other topics. We've already had a bit of that dynamic in the earlier conversation about mental health. Instead, they've been chosen by the SROs from across the system as ideal areas to test our strategic aims and ambitions for integrated care in response to our population's health and care needs. The next slide then looks at engagement as a key element of the strategy, and from the very beginning of the partnership we were clear that this was a really big priority. Gathering insight from our diverse population about their experiences of care, their views and their suggestions for improving services, along with their wider needs, is going to be essential to the success of this strategy going forward. We've developed a strategic approach to engagement, which includes key principles and some frameworks that are going to underpin our ways of working, and those are described in section 6. For integrated care specifically, we established a communication and engagement group last year with representation from health, local authorities, Healthwatch and the VCSE Alliance. And that group has overseen the development of an insight document that pulls together insights gathered over the last 12 months from right across our communities into one place, and has been used to highlight high-level themes for consideration by system and programme leaders. Those insights were then fed in to the SROs and teams as part of the evidence base that they used for the selection of the key areas of focus. And the document summarises the planned next steps for engagement that you can see highlighted on the slide. We've also developed a schedule of forums through which we'll communicate the draft strategy and gather feedback on its content. And this is being held by Sean and the Joined Up Care Derbyshire Communications and Engagement team. And the forums, the list of forums, constantly being revised and informed by the strategy working groups. We're really keen to hear general comments and suggestions from citizens, groups and meetings, and also specifically what people think are the key issues and opportunities for achieving the desired improvements in our enablers, and how we can bring those to bear around those key areas of focus, building on what we've already got in the document, so that the work programmes that I'm going to come on to talk about in a minute can use this feedback to help shape our improvement and delivery plans. On the next slide then, about delivery, we hope that the draft strategy and then the final version that's going to follow in April will be helpful in articulating our Joined Up Care Derbyshire approach to integrated care, and for facilitating those ongoing conversations as part of the engagement process. Alongside this, though, we need to move swiftly into mobilising work programmes so that we can really show commitment to delivering the strategy aims and the opportunities identified, building on the significant work that we've already got underway, and also tackling the key constraints that we've flagged. We're going to need consistency in approach and oversight across those key areas of focus to do this successfully. We've already got groups in place that can lead the work programmes. We talked about the Children and Young People's Delivery Board. We've got the Population Health Management Steering Group and the Integrated Place Executive. But as I mentioned earlier, we need to review and assess the robustness and particularly the connectivity of the governance arrangements that Chris described very accurately as complex and complicated. And in particular, we need to understand, we need to gain clarity on how delivery actions are being coordinated right across that whole Joined Up Care Derbyshire architecture, including with the Health and Wellbeing Boards. It was great to hear Christine talking about how we're beginning that work in the County Place Partnership. We also need to review system resources to deliver the strategy, including programme management capacity to coordinate, chase and report on delivery of the milestones that we develop, and to manage evaluation of the strategy so that we can have really visible progress that we can hold ourselves to account on, and also our citizens can hold us to account on in terms of achieving the outcomes that we are aiming for. So these are all issues that are going to need more consideration and stewardship through a senior forum with delegated responsibility around this strategy. And the proposal is that the Integrated Place Executive undertake this role and manage delivery of the strategy on behalf of the Integrated Care Partnership. And then next slide, just to summarise, the suggested impact really of why are we doing all this? What's the purpose of the Integrated Care Strategy? We need to be able to answer questions like, what's not going to happen if we don't all commit to taking this forward? What are the gaps that it seeks to fill? And then we think that the Integrated Care Strategy will do what we've said there. The way in which we've developed the strategy is just as important as its content, and the stronger working relationships between all of us that we're developing through this strategy development will prove beneficial way beyond the remit of the strategy itself in terms of that collaborative and collective working. The strategy for the first time captures those key enablers that are absolutely critical to the development of high quality, sustainable, integrated care. It gives us those practical areas of focus to test those actions so that we can truly join up our strategic enablers. System-wide conversations have led to the agreement on the 3 key areas that we're going to use to test our strategic aims and deliver meaningful population health and service outcome improvements to our citizens. And then the final point, just pulling that thread of engagement right through the strategy to the end, to ensure improvements arising from the strategy are meaningful and impactful for citizens, we have to commit to further testing and developing that emerging approach to engagement that we've started to get us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen and Tracy. And we're just saying about how much hard work goes into it, you know, to produce something like this, but it's open to members of the board now. Any suggestions, any advice, any queries, any... Yes, Roy.
Just a comment I've made before on this, and I'm not against the digitisation of records, particularly patient records, so that they don't have to repeat the story time after time, and the use of paper is becoming less and less in our health facilities. But we've got to remember that there is an older population that may not necessarily be au fait with digitisation, and there has got to be a way of engaging those people in the consultation process and also for access to care.
Totally agree, Roy. Anybody? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Not a question, more of an affirmation. So, really welcome this. I really welcome the alignment with Health and Wellbeing Board strategies. That comes through the documents and the approach. So that's thing one ticked from my perspective in terms of avoiding duplication but getting alignment. So I really support it. Secondly, I really support the proposal about where this is, inverted commas, managed and overseen. And I've really thought long and hard about how you get a sort of executive management forum to oversee this work. And for me, I think the Integrated Place Executive is the best place. And by doing that, we'll have alignment with both places and Health and Wellbeing Boards as a consequence. So I think that's, you know, the best place for us to manage it on behalf of the ICB. So fully welcome, fully support it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There's not much point in having a strategy if somebody isn't keeping an eye that we're, we're actually working and acting on it. John.
Thank you very much for that, and very helpful, and also very helpful to sort of see some of the further thinking you're looking to do over the next couple of months before bringing it. Just a couple of observations from me. I think your comment, Tracy, that the process is more important, maybe more important. I absolutely sign up to that. I think that's absolutely right. Are there some organisations which still need to get really engaged in this, or do you think you've got? I don't want you necessarily to name them, but you know, it does seem to me that if there are some organisations who aren't engaged in this, or some partners, I should say, who aren't as engaged in this as they might have been, then that's quite important for the next couple of months to really make sure. And if I'm sure that Caroline and Roy would be very helpful, very willing to help in terms of encouraging people to do that, if that would be. So, do you want to pick up that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I'll defer to colleagues who've been closer to the working group. I think we've had really, really good engagement from, I think, all partners. I think there is work now to do to make sure that the outputs of that excellent engagement across all partners is properly socialised and understood right through all the partner organisations, and the commitment, understanding what organisations have signed up to as part, you know, they've supported the engagement, but has it trickled all the way back up through organisations? And that's going to be something that we all need to work on over the next few months.
Just a second point. We talk about strategy for Derbyshire, but we know that there are different geographies within that, which will have different priorities and a different area of focus, etc. How much have we actually engaged with communities up to now? And looking forward, how do you see that happening? Because I know, a lot of the engagement has been with partners and things like that, but as we develop this, I think the community voice, the strategy needs to be embedded in communities as well.
Go, and then Kate can say what I should have said. So I think if we agree this draft strategy today, John, we are all signing up to doing more of that engagement at a more granular level, and we have excellent challenges and prompts and reminders all the time from our VCS Alliance colleagues that we need to think about communities of interest as well as communities of place. Got it, Christopher. So I think there is a lot more to do, but I do think it's important to go back to the insights work. So right across our organisations, we are all the time working with those communities of interest and communities of place and collecting insight. I think we've made a big step forward in the last year in trying to pull all that insight together to support this use, but there's still more to do, and it's not a one-off process.
No, I think that last point you made is really important. I think you did in the presentation. This is an ongoing journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we also just would like to commend again and acknowledge what we think is a very good strategy. And we'd also like to reinforce again the very great importance of the strategic enablers, and in particular the purpose, values, principles and behaviours, just on the basis that this is a massive shift. And the standard cliche that you can't keep doing it the way you did and expect different results. So this is where we change those behaviours. There are models, there's expertise available in that. There's a lot we can draw on. The voluntary sector, for example, on engagement can contribute some excellent models for that and work together on them. So we just would like to stress that again, please, and thank you. The second point has already been answered. We would have again raised communities of place and interest, and maybe that particular body may carry that name instead of just place. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really impressive, and I think what's impressive are the opportunities for review, for taking a step back and looking if we're going in the right direction. There's a lot of engagement already taken place, and I think that the whole, what we've just spoken about then about insight, looking across the partnership for insight, and that will come in different ways. The data won't always look the same, it won't always be polished, but it'll still be data, it'll still be evidence and should still be used. And I think just the final point is that we don't very often talk about trust, but trust in partnerships is really important. And I think, you know, we've got to be honest about that. And, you know, where we feel that there are a problem, we've got to say it. But I think, you know, looking at this, you know, it's impeccable in terms of the trust, I think, that we've got in terms of moving forward.
Thank you. Did you want to come in? Sorry, back first and then back to Abby. Thank you.
I'm just going to answer a few of the points. It's Caroline Green again. So what I was going to say was I had to challenge my organisation that it doesn't mention mental health. And I said it doesn't have to, because if you do these things in this document of good health and well-being, and if you do the other pieces which helps people with their living conditions and support people in their wider cardiovascular outcomes, that will lead to better mental health. So it's about time that we move to a different place and move towards the prevention agenda. So earlier, although colleagues said, where could we see different aspects of mental health coming through, mental health has significant investment in its inpatient estates, into children's and young people's services, and now we need to move into this next place. So that's what I'll be saying to my organisation, that's what I'll be saying when I work with the people in carers groups and when we take it through to the Trust Board, to say we're moving into a different place. So colleagues, thank you for that, but I just thought that would be helpful to give that insight.
Thank you. Avi.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on general practice. It's very good to hear that that's being specifically mentioned. I think general practice can sometimes be deemed to be a hard-to-reach group because there's so many of them. I think we're in a better position with that now, with the GPPB, with the PCNs, with the CPLG, but also they hold the list sizes, which makes it very useful in terms of the three facets that were mentioned. So I'm really glad about that.
Thank you. I think the same as people have said, very much welcome the document. I think in terms of the insight, I would really like to emphasise that insight that we have undertaken over the last 12 to 18 months, particularly in the city, if I look at the work that Public Health and ourselves as a sector have done, and the Derby Health Inequalities report, it's really important that we build on what we've got and that we speak to each other, and that those connections that we're talking about are so important at this point and this time, that I guess from my perspective, I want to make sure that when it becomes actually delivery, that we don't throw or miss a lot of that really important intelligence, and then reporting back to those communities, because those communities have given their time and given their input. And actually, it's really important that we continue to have those elements of dialogue with those communities to ensure that they feel that they want to be involved moving forward.
I've not put my microphone on. We're going to agenda item 8, which is East Midlands Ambulance Service Strategy. That's over to you, isn't it? Will, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just got a proposal for you, Chair, if possible. I'm waiting for a couple of colleagues to arrive, and they were due to come at 1:45, as per the agenda. I'm just wondering, I know it's out of order, but I wondered if we could move to item 9, and then as soon as they get here, come back to the strategy, possibly. I'm happy to do it without them, as you wish, Chair, but just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I can see those colleagues arriving now. So I think we'll be back on item 8 in any minute. So this really is just for members to note today. This is a report relating to a review of Section 75 agreements that was conducted by the Derbyshire County Council Health Scrutiny Committee. And one of the recommendations of the report that Scrutiny Committee took to the Derbyshire County Council Cabinet recently was that the Integrated Care Partnership should receive the conclusions of that scrutiny review. So this is simply here as a matter for note today, but with a recommendation as discussed with the Chair that actually we ask the Integrated Place Executive, that same group we were just talking about that will look at the strategy, to consider the use of Section 75 arrangements in all of its deliberations in relation to aligned budgets, shared budgets in that strategic context. So we will, with the agreement of the partnership today, take this report also into the Integrated Place Executive for further consideration. Thank you, Chair.
I don't know any comments, but it was, I mean, I must admit I hadn't heard of these 75 agreements, but our previous Director of Public Health sort of talked me through it, and it sounded, it sounded a really good way forward. It was enabled things to move in a quicker and much faster way, and change things without having to go all the rigmarole of local government and reports and waiting and goodness knows what. So, and I think it's always good that people do scrutinise this and just make sure it is still a good way forward. And I think Health Scrutiny at Derbyshire did a really excellent job on it, and came out, they could see all the benefits for it. And there are one or two things that they raised queries on, but in general that they really supported it, and I think that we continue to use it, and I know our current Director of Public Health agrees with them, so we have got quite a few of those agreements. So, so it's really just for noting and for information there, and that's so. We'll now revert back to to you, Will and Imas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and sorry about that. Welcome to Vicky, my colleague, who's going to run through the presentation in a second. So, as you would imagine, developing a strategy for a regional service which covers technically 6 different ICSs is, as I say, a real conundrum for us and a real challenge, and I really welcome the opportunity to be able to talk to you today about EMAS's strategy and its kind of ambitions as we go forward over the next few years. We've got a short presentation to run through with you, which will articulate through a few of our ideas and show you some of the ambitions that we have as an organisation. And we're really keen to try and have a little bit of feedback from you today, if possible, whether that's appropriate in this forum and in this meeting or outside of this meeting directly with us. That's absolutely fine, whichever is suitable. I think having the integrated care strategy on the agenda today has set a really important backdrop to the conversation that we're going to have. And although the presentation isn't as detailed and the work isn't as finalised as the integrated care strategy we've seen today, actually we're very mindful of all of our integrated care systems developing their own strategies. We're very acutely aware of that, working closer to home, working in a more integrated fashion, and we absolutely do not want to be the ambulance service which is seen as separate to delivery of healthcare and well-being for the citizens that we provide care for. So it's absolutely about providing an integrated service, and absolutely about trying to dovetail with the local plans and support the delivery of the local plans in each of our ICSs, Derby and Derbyshire especially. I'm going to hand over to Vicky now, who's going to run through our short presentation, and then there's a few questions on the last slide, which, Chair, if it's okay with you, happy to take any questions on once we've run through. So,
thank you. Okay, can I have the next slide up, please? Oh, how do I? So, as Will said, this is just a short presentation, and we are engaging early in development of this, and at the moment we are talking about some high-level strategic aims and ambitions, and what we're really asking is how do we deliver this with the system? What else can we deliver on behalf of the system, and how can you support us in taking it forward?
And so why a new strategy for us now is really prudent to us that we respond and react to a changing landscape in integrated care boards and integrated care partnerships, that we are able to react and respond to provider collaboratives, and of course that we've all seen a change in demand and change in need in response to COVID that's significantly changed our approaches, and do we need a new delivery model to support us in doing that. Also, it does say emerging, but we recently had a new urgent and emergency care delivery plan that was launched, and that started to identify a new approach as well going forward. So that's all influencing our model. Next, please. So I'm just going to skip over that one. Actually, that one just describes where we are in terms of commissioning of ambulance services, but it does just indicate that we as an ambulance service have an opportunity to really support integrated community provision and identification of needs in the community, and as a service out and about seeing patients day in, day out, have a really good understanding of people's needs and could use that information far better to support wider development of services, and support the delivery of the integrated care system and integrated care board in their agenda. Next, please. And this is a little out of date because we submitted these slides about a week ago, and the world is changing quite rapidly right now. But there's, as I said, a new urgent and emergency care delivery plan now that's been released, and still points to our direction in changing the ambulance sector's role in the system, and how we support some of the growing demand, and how we might respond to increasing different integration in the community to support our workforce better and to support the wider workforce better, how we might contribute to tackling health inequalities, and a tailored approach with some of the most deprived communities, and how we might do more in terms of keeping patients at home and treating them in the community rather than conveying them to hospital, which we can only do in collaboration with wider services, both health and social care, to have access to things to help us to keep patients at home. And a key is integration between 999 and 111, so that patients really understand the most appropriate route of care to access where they need to go, and that we manage a single point of access effectively across our services so that patients can get the care that they need in the setting that they need. Next, please. So the principles in which we want to engage on our strategy, and the key take-home messages, I suppose, from what we're sharing today, is that we want to signal our intent as an organisation to be an integrated urgent care provider working in collaboration with the wider system, and that bit that we're led with in terms of how we do that jointly with the wider health and care organisations across the system. We, in doing that, we're considering how we provide both Category 1 and Category 2 and Category 3 for urgent care type services. So that's our emergency care and our urgent care in response to 999, better collaboration, potentially delivering them separately, but how we would do that without detriment to the other, and how we ensure we improve the quality of both of those things. We also want to contribute to the health inequalities agenda, and we have a role in using our data, we believe, to better inform where there are gaps in services and where people's needs aren't being appropriately met in the community, to help wider system partners to identify what else we can do to keep people in the right setting, as well as our role in providing primary, secondary, tertiary prevention when we're on scene with individuals. We want to realise our vision to support our workforce, and again, we want to do this collaboratively with wider system partners. And we are in the process of developing a single strategy as an organisation, as Will said, managing the challenges of working across multiple integrated care systems, that enables us as a regional provider to be both consistent in what we offer to our workforce, but also to be able to respond to local need and local structures. And so we are developing this in collaboration, therefore, with the systems, with our people, and with our wider stakeholders. I'm so sorry. Thought that was off. That's not very helpful, is it? They're not easy phones to turn on silent either. Apologies. Yeah, and our strategy will reflect the national and local direction as well. And so we've launched a public engagement piece of work around this. We do have on our website links for members of the public, members of partner organisations and our staff, an opportunity to provide feedback and input into the development of our strategy. Next slide, please. And this slide, just to say that we are developing an overarching vision. We have a set of values that underpin the way that our staff work, and we're setting our ambitions, which I'll talk through in a minute, but we're also really keen that this 5-year strategy sets out the actions that we will take over the next few years to deliver that and the outcomes, and we are able to hold ourselves to account for delivery of those actions. Next, please. So these are the draft ambition statements that we have as an organisation, and really the bit that we want to ask wider partners and the public about in terms of what do these mean to you? Do these feel like the right things we should be focusing on? What are the things that we as an organisation can do to improve our delivery of these things over the next few years, and how can other organisations support us in doing that? The first one really focusing on our role working in partnership to deliver integrated services and to improve clinical care and models across the pathways. But the second one really focusing on our workforce and how we develop and support our workforce and are an attractive employer that keeps people working in the local system, and how we might do that together with Derbyshire in terms of some of the one workforce approaches and shared workforce across the system. The third relates to our vehicles, technology, IT, the things that support our staff to deliver the care that they need to. The fourth is about having a compassionate culture and seeing improvement day to day in what we do and how we deliver that. And then the last one relates to what I've already described as our role in supporting the health inequalities agenda and wider social value within the system. And I think there are some questions. That might be the last slide. So if we can move on to the next one. Oh, and that just shows that we are, over the next month or so, we're doing a little bit more engagement across systems with a view to developing a draft strategy for our March board and having this agreed in April. And then we'll be working with partners to share our strategy and start to deliver it. And then the final slide, I hope, are the key questions that we wanted to bring to this room. So, as I said, do our strategic ambitions feel like the right ones? How can we work with the system to deliver these ambitions? And what else? How else would you like us to engage wider? And I just, before I finish, wanted to hand over to Karen, who I think would have liked to have been here at the start. Did you want to introduce yourself briefly, Karen? Mic on.
Yeah, let's be. Yeah, just to apologise, parking was somewhat of a challenge. But yeah, we come here, and I'm sure Vicky introduced it well. I'm the chairman of East Midlands Ambulance Trust, and we welcome the opportunity of going out to see all our partners in the health and care system to introduce our strategy and to take any comments or any ideas that you think you can take from the presentation that we've given to date. It's not completed yet. It's not completed because we wanted to share it with you and take any comments, any ideas or suggestions from each of our partners. So thanks, Vicky, for taking that introduction and through the presentation. So yes, those are the three questions that we have for you, and we're happy to answer any questions or to give any clarity that you might want from the presentation. Thank you.
Right, thank you. It saves me reading out all the things that we're required to do. So you've seen the three questions. Has anybody got anything they'd like to? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So pleased that you've come this afternoon, actually. That was really interesting. And it's nice to see that you have a very well developed document. I think for me, the one area that perhaps we can work with and strengthen is around community, and very much at local community level. My name's Kim Harper, by the way, Community Action Derby. So very much voluntary sector perspective on things. But we're working on something around hospital discharge at the moment. We have a Good Neighbours scheme in the city where people very much want to volunteer and support to get people home from hospital, to support people when they're coming home, going into hospital as well. So I think actually as part of the strategy, looking at those wider community networks and how we can utilise those is really important. I can only speak from a city perspective, but obviously in the county there's community transport as well. So I think it's how that becomes part of the strategy at a sort of macro level to enable that very micro level response. It is quite important to do that connection. So yeah, really good to see you this afternoon.
Thank you. So my name is Chris Pienaar from Derbyshire Autism Services, but a representative in the sector. So first of all, to thank you for the incredible work you do. I mean, I don't know how you do it under the the conditions. So thank you. We work a lot and refer a lot through your service, so we know. The question is within the strategy, people with hidden disabilities, saying neurodivergence, for example, it's now increasingly recognised the huge impact of the environment on individuals such as that, and that in fact going into hospital, for example, can actually make them even more unhealthy or affect their health badly. So there are now strategies on the go to improve that within hospitals, and I do know that you're part of collective meetings in which you seek to improve practice as to how to handle, for example, individuals with autism who struggle going into the ambulance, for example, and must make it very difficult for your staff. So in the strategy, are you having a look at hidden disabilities and how things could be further improved, particularly in terms of environment in the ambulance, etc.? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to answer that. Thank you very much for the question. So there's a multitude of different ways that we do that in the ambulance service. So right from a top-level strategy in terms of making sure that we've got the right time for our staff to have education and learning, and things like our vehicle design. We have a vehicle design group which looks at specific challenges like that and what we can do around vehicle design to try and improve that. Obviously, we're involved in those local groups, as you say, trying to get that feedback and include that in our future plans. And certainly, even in our next year's education plan, we've got some specific time laid out for education and learning around learning disability, autism, etc. So there's absolutely some key parts of our work plan which include the work we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Helen Jones. I'm the Executive Director for Adult Social Care and Health with Derbyshire County Council. I've met some of you, your heads on the screen, but not all of you in person. So it's lovely to meet you. And similarly, echoing comments, it's been really valuable. I think you're bringing this here today, so thank you very much for that. I think it's a similar point to the one Chris made, really, about how explicit you might want to be in your ambition statement. So with what Chris was making, the point Chris was making, to think about compassionate care for patients, I guess there's a question for me about, would you want to be more explicit about recognising difference in that context? But my point was coming more from that kind of social model of care as well. So as partners, we talk a lot about enabling independent, strength-based approaches, keeping people at home as long as possible. I know from the conversations we have in partnership meetings that EMAS is absolutely about those things, and some of the new models you're looking at are about keeping people at home rather than conveying to hospital. Again, it's just a question. I wonder whether in the ambition statement you want to be more explicit about the nature of that, because you do that so well, but it feels that really would have some alignment with what we're trying to do as a partnership as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellie Holston. I'm Director of Public Health at Derbyshire County Council. I wanted to say really welcome the focus on inequalities in your ambitions. I think that's really positive. And just in terms of you asking about ideas, just thinking about the use of the data and intelligence that the ambulance service gathers. There's been some great work done in other parts of the country looking at alcohol, serious violence, falls, and so there's something there to consider about how we can explore working more closely together, particularly around the JSNA, and how we look at across the county and feed that intelligence from the ambulance service.
As a regional organisation, you've got to work with all sorts of integrated care systems across the region, and your performance has an impact on all of them. So what are you looking at to provide information? I was at one of our scrutiny boards last week where they were complaining about the number of ambulances queued outside of hospitals and the massive hours that they're waiting, and yet we hear from this meeting that you don't have that problem in Derbyshire and Derby. So, you know, how are you going to expand your performance across different areas of the region that you serve?
Thanks very much for the question. It's probably fair to say that every area, Derby and Derbyshire included, still has some challenges. In terms of things like queuing ambulances at hospitals, it still happens. It happens to different degrees across the different systems. And Derbyshire is thankfully one of those areas which is slightly better across the East Midlands than some of the other areas. So I think where there's feedback from the public straight into those scrutiny committees and coming through, which suggests that there are ambulance delays in hospitals, that's technically still going to be true. It's just to the degree compared to some of the other areas across the East Midlands, it might be slightly less. So there's a variation there, and I think the point's well made about making sure that we've got transparency over information, transparency over how that affects what we do as an ambulance service as well, because clearly when we've got an ambulance which is queuing outside of a hospital, it's not out there responding to a patient need. So I think everyone agrees that it's not the right thing to be doing, and we're trying to minimise it as much as possible. And obviously the report that we heard from Chris earlier on around the work of the Integrated Care Board and minimising that in Derbyshire is very welcome and fully supported by us as a service. I think in terms of information going to those health and wellbeing boards, very happy to take that offline, and the scrutiny committee is very happy to take that offline and make sure that we're providing the appropriate information that the boards and committees would want to see.
Thank you. I was just going to follow slightly on from Ellie's comments. I'm Robin, I'm the Director of Public Health here in Derby City. And just to say also that I'm the SRO for Health Inequalities for the system. Ellie is the SRO for Prevention. And I'm sure, forgive me if I'm speaking, I'm sure Ellie would also be very happy to meet and have a chat about what this could look like. I think there's lots that we could explore.
Thank you for that. I was just taken about one comment, which was out and about. We're out and about seeing patients. It's so much more than just conveying to a hospital, and so much more what you do. You see that in the community all the time. And I think that's a real challenge being across such a large area and trying to tap into what a smaller neighbourhood might want from you as well. We get that. But I'd just be interested into how you might plan to do that, particularly from a general practice and primary community care perspective. And then one suggestion I might just make, the medical director already a member of the CPC, but we wonder if that would tap you in some areas in the Derbyshire.
Thanks very much, Avi. And absolutely. There'll also be a clinical strategy which follows on from our overarching trust strategy as well. So either, both absolutely need to come to that group in particular. I think in terms of integrating with kind of local communities, local PCNs, local kind of partnership and areas, and being locally sensitive, I think the reality is if we talk to a few frontline staff, they were in the room now, and we ask them, how do you feel as though you work in your local community? They'd already know the local GP. They'd already know a lot of the community staff which are out there working with patients already. And nothing that we want to do wants to take any of that away. We want to build on that, enhance it, and make sure that there is the autonomy and trust and relationships there to be able to build even further the care that we can provide in combination with those other healthcare professionals on the front line.
You know, it's very, very frequent that we will be on the scene with a patient, we'll be talking to that patient, we might need to talk to their GP, we might need to talk to other care professionals who are involved with that particular patient. We'll make those calls and we make those connections, and it happens almost as a virtual team working around that patient even now. And I think there's nothing that we would propose in our strategy which would undo any of that. It's all about trying to go and build on that experience and go further. So I think for me, in terms of the core actions, it's listening to our frontline staff, asking them and working with them to build on what they already do, but listening to them about what works and make sure that we can continue to allow that to take place and go further with it, because the connections are already there. That's a really interesting question. I think the reality is that it's probably the 80-20 rule applies here. So I think 80% is common across all of the ICSs that we're discussing this with. There will always be local variation, which is absolutely warranted for the local population need, and that might be a specific focus on a particular prevalence of a health condition and therefore specialist skills or specialist workforce required around that. It might be the geography that particular area has means that we have to do something slightly different in that geography to provide that best service for patients. I think the underpinning fundamentals around emergency ambulance care and urgent ambulance care are pretty consistent across all of the different ICSs. I think the interesting part in this is as different systems start to introduce complementary services, so urgent community response, full services, those kind of things, it's making sure that EMAS centrally, as a regional service, has got the right technology and the right mechanisms to be able to integrate with those services, whatever they might be in each of those different areas, because it would be an absolute travesty to have services which are there for the benefit of patients, which aren't being fully utilised and fully integrated into the way that the ambulance service operates as well. So I think the 20% comes from those local services, but the 80% has got to have that integration capability to make sure we're maximising that as part of our response.
Sorry, the second question, if I may, is you've got an interesting statement about ED and ambulances are a choice, not a default. Do you have a role in helping people make an informed choice, and how are you going to do that?
Yes, we absolutely do. Our comms and engagement team work fairly tirelessly, actually, trying to inform the public, not just in a kind of negative sense of the ambulance service, because I think we've all probably seen adverts across the whole of the country, which is about what you shouldn't ring an ambulance for. There's obviously the flip side of that, which is the positive side of what you should be ringing an ambulance for. I think it's very pertinent that Stephen's sitting next to me, Chief Executive of DHU Healthcare, running 111 services locally, because it's actually a piece in tandem that we need to do. And as we've talked through the presentation around very close working between 111 and 999, I think it's really complicated for the public at the moment to know where that demarcation is between ringing 111 and 999. I think I would probably know, but that's obviously I've got some inside knowledge about what we do as an organisation. But I can't blame the public sometimes for ringing 999 for something that we might, in the cold light of day, say, actually, you should have probably have spoken to your GP or rang 111 about that. But it's our job to make sure that we get that messaging right and we dovetail our services together. So if they do choose to ring a number which isn't the best number for them to get the right response, we still deliver them the most appropriate response. So I think it's a combined effort, really, between all of our services to make sure that message is there.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, John, for the question and Will for the answer. In terms of just give us some assurance, the work that you're talking about, Will, we are working very heavily on that, aren't we, in terms of the collaboration and the joint working. And to actually take it to a level of the way we're working is getting that system integration as well. So working to that same system platform, whether you're a 999 patient that comes in through 999 or 11, ultimately throughout that pathway you should have the same experience, the same outcome, irrespective of the access route in. The equity of access and the effectiveness of the systems that support it and the workforce that are trained to do it, and then the outcome will be effective. but working very collectively together on delivering that as joint partners within both the East Midlands and certainly within Derby and Derbyshire.
I'm reprimanding other people and then don't switch my own on. Sorry about that. Just saying, when that you mentioned see and treat and hear and treat, and I just think that, just an observation, I don't know what the ratios is of sort of home visits or sort of not home, but you know, you are going into homes and probably can see problems there and all that. So I mean, I presume that there is already a way that perhaps you raise that, because you know, it is a way in. I mean, one of the things I think when the fire and rescue service went down doing smoke alarms and things like that, checking on houses, they reported back if they could see. And, you know, it's getting that information, isn't it, to help people. So that was just an observation on that, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we look out for, you know, those rolled edges on carpets and rugs and things that might be a trip hazard and all those kind of things. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't really fit smoke detectors, but we do look at general environment for people. Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, again, I think it's the same thing. You know, if anybody thinks of anything or they want to get in touch, I'm sure you'd appreciate it. You know, please, you know, email. And as I say, you don't always think of something on the actual meeting, and you might think of something a bit later. So hopefully there'll be some feedback if anybody comes up with anything. So thank you for that. So well, we've skipped 9 because we've already done 9. So we're on to 10, clinical and care professional leadership development, progress and forward plan. Over to you, Avi. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give you a quick update. There's a lot of papers. I'm sorry about that. So the vast majority of the information is in there, and I'll take those as read. So I'm just going to pick out a few salient points. So this has been run a few committees already, so apologies if some of you have already heard this. So we moved from a clinical and professional reference group to a clinical and professional leadership group a while ago as the movement was into the ICS. The one letter is quite important. We're moving away from reference and engagement and more to leadership and integrating into the system. Crucially, this is not just doctors. I think that's a really important facet to say here. It's allied health professionals, it's social care, it's pharmacy, it's dentistry. It's everybody from a clinical and professional slant who will be involved in the care of a patient. And crucially, this is people who actually will see patients on a day-to-day basis as well. So that there is the sort of the old-fashioned floor-to-board concept going on. We have a group that meet with a defined membership, which is ever evolving. And the membership encompasses most of the organisations here and clinical input from those. And we know that the membership needs to evolve as we go on. Crucially, we've also managed to, I think, get robust input from general practice, which is often a challenge in some of these groups. And we've formatted our meetings such that we are quite clear that some aspects are invariably going to be NHS related, some aspects are going to be wider, and some aspects are going to be developmental as well, as per the architecture of the system at the moment. We've also set up an SLT, so we have a senior leadership team meeting, which meets more frequently, and, for example, would be able to access a conversation like the EMAS one without it having to go to a larger meeting, have an informal discussion, to hopefully have a degree of agility. And we've put in place some vice chairs to make sure our tentacles are everywhere in the system, if you know what I mean. The system has been very nice to us in giving us representation on here at the ICB, at the PHSCC, and the Provider Collaborative Leadership Board. And in essence, what we're trying to do is give the system and each facet of it a sort of clear and coherent multi-stakeholder clinical and professional leadership view, as opposed to it coming from one small area of the system, which doesn't encompass all of the facets and all of the stakeholders. One of those is actually trying to make sure the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. So a lot of this work is already going on brilliantly within organisations. We don't want to delve within organisations.
what we want is to get to it has become a cliche, but it is still true, the club and country concept. So there are some things going on with organisations, and then that clinical work can be brought into the system so one facet knows what the other one is doing. That's quite a challenging piece of work to get there, but we are trying. Crucially, we're not here to duplicate, and we're not here to put an extra layer. If anything, we are hoping to actually make less layers, simplify the process, and be an easier go-to resource for the system to allow a degree of enablement. And one of the aspects on the terms of reference is actually to allow certain groups, if there is no impact on any other area, to be able to get on and do something, so that the members of the clinical community from organisations will be able to influence those organisations to get on and undertake pieces of work going forwards. We've had a couple of engagement events, a few actually, one with the wider clinicians, sort of on the ground clinicians as well, one with some of the clinicians and professionals who are working within organisations, and we continue those. We do have an event, which I've got to plug, on I believe the 16th of February, which I'm hoping most people here, or everybody here has been invited to. If not, let me know and I will make sure that it happens. And particularly that's an NHSE joint event to make sure that we're tapping into those who are actually in decision-making positions, as well as the clinicians and professionals, so the whole system knows what's going on with us and how crucially we can help. And then there'll be a list of the things that we've looked at in here there. One of the things we've put together recently is a clinical pathway governance model, co-produced by the CPLG and everybody within it, and the organisations within this room. Just to make sure that if there is a clinical or professional pathway change that will involve patients, that the right hand always does know what the left hand is doing there, and there is a clear system view on it if it's involving more than one organisation, never to interfere within an organisation. And we'll also be looking to develop a clinical strategy akin to what UMass and others are doing. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Ravi?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Avi, for the report. Not a question, but just a sort of positioning, if I may. So the report's here for information, but I wouldn't want the ICP not to recognise the importance of this agenda across the partnership. It's here for information because the truth is, as Avi has set out, is that as it stands at the moment, this is an NHS-dominated agenda. I think we all recognise that across the partnership, and so the NHS has committed to support it. But I'd hate for the partnership not to recognise that it's there for the partnership, and in the years to come, and I use that word carefully, that we'll have to increase the ownership of it as it develops. So I hope that's helpful, Chair, and thank you.
Thank you for that, Chris. John.
Very similar point. I mean, it's clinical and professional, and that wider professional means that we want to bring in across the whole health and care system professions to inform the views. And so I'd absolutely support what Chris has said. I think that's really important that we do that.
Thank you. Just a question really, what constitutes clinical professional, just in terms of first steps eating disorders and Umbrella and DAS, the organisations that are working across the system with professionals as well, are they involved in the work that you're doing and undertaking?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to talk to you and talking to this at the same time. I think my comment at the beginning about the evolution. So I wouldn't want to put any boundaries on what defines clinical and professional. For me, that will evolve with time. That will be a spectrum. It might, because it is a very broad concept, everything we do might not encompass everybody, but we don't want to ever say to anybody there is no involvement in this.
Has there been up to this point? Because I think if not, we're missing an opportunity to bring those voices to the table as well, perhaps.
Then please let me know.
Thank you.
And if I can just chip in, please, also the other way around, of course, there's the opportunity for the VCSE sector to take on some of those, well, there may be lower level skills in some cases, but to take on more and more skills to just keep improving the work of the VCSE sector gaining that knowledge from our health colleagues. Thank you.
Just to come back on that, one of the most challenging bits we've seen has actually been, it's quite easy to tap into sort of larger organisations in terms of kind of professional input. One of the most challenging things we've seen is actually trying to map all that is going on out there, because there's a very clear Johari's window if not everybody can see everything. So we continue to do that work, and that's why conversations like this are so useful, to be able to then say, right, now where can we go? So please let me know. I think we can start forward.
I think no other questions. So, thank you, and do realise how important it is. And yeah, thank you for the presentation. Keep us up to date. So we go on to item 11. I think that's over to you, Alice. Non-scheduled meetings. Oh, is Alex going to do it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for coming to the first constituted meeting of the ICP today. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. The report should be fairly self-explanatory. It sets the dates for the remainder of this municipal year, and also puts some tentative dates in place for the next municipal year. For colleagues from the ICB, the custom and practice of the two councils would be to confirm a schedule of meetings at their annual meetings, which would take place in May. So any dates beyond May are subject to ratification at those annual general meetings, but we see no reason why those would change. And from May onwards, we'd be looking to set a full 12 months of meeting dates going forward, and they will be confirmed in due course. I understand colleagues from all three partners are in discussion about those dates at the moment. The report also clarifies the reporting deadlines for this meeting, both in terms of preparing the agenda, and so briefings with the chair can take place, and also the statutory publication date, which again, for those of you who are not familiar with local government practice, we're required to publish our meeting papers 5 clear working days in advance of the meeting. So in the case of today's meeting, the papers were required to be published last Tuesday. And that's everything in the report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Can't see any questions. I think it's a good idea to give a reminder of when reports have to be in and everything else, you know, there's all the deadlines and everything. So it looks as though we're going to bring the meeting to a close a bit earlier. I'm sure nobody minds it being a little bit shorter than, rather than longer. Sorry. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just going to embarrass Helen. This is going to be Helen's last meeting for Derbyshire County Council. So I just thought I'd make everybody aware of that, and just, again, put my thanks forward, because Helen is just incredible and she's going to be dearly missed.
You jumped the gun. It was on my list. You know, I had got it down. It's a long farewells. It was a bit like when Dean left us as Director of Public Health, and Helen is now leaving us for pastures new. And yeah, I mean, the amount of work that Helen has been involved in, and it's been a pleasure working with her. And Natalie, we share her as a director. So I'm sure I'll speak for all the board that we appreciate all that you've done and wish you all the best in your future roles. Yeah, moving on. So, but thank you, Helen. I think, you know, just something else as well. Feels quite strange, me sitting in the chairman's seat in Derby City Council. Feels quite strange, but I could quite get used to it, Royce. So it really is just thank you for your attendance, and hope you found it useful, and it really is nice to have a physical meeting and meet people again, and yeah, it's been quite enjoyable. So hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have in a weird way. So thank you, and I declare the meeting closed, and